the headline from CBS News: the Texas State Fair gun rule stands. So this from CBS News. S.E. Jenkins reports Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has vowed to continue defending what he considers Texans' right to carry firearms on land owned or leased by governmental entities. So any of you guys who are out there in the fair industry, particularly on the fair side, this is a story I think you want to pay careful attention to, regardless of what your state's laws may or may not be. I think this is one you're going to want to watch. The Texas Supreme Court ruled on Thursday night that it would not block a firearms ban instituted by the State Fair of Texas. AG Ken Paxton's office had sued previously, claiming that the city and the fair are violating Texas state law by prohibiting most people from bringing firearms onto public property. Justice Jimmy Blaylock wrote in the opinion that declined to block the fair's gun rule that the state's motion did not take a position on whether a private entity, such as the State Fair of Texas, can prohibit patrons from carrying guns. That's interesting. I took a quick look at the state's original motion that was issued by AG Paxton, and I think Justice Blaylock's right. It kind of surprised me that that was not included in the original argument. So the Texas AG went on to say, Texans have a right to lawful, this is a quote now, Texans have a right to lawfully carry, and the city of Dallas has no authority to contract their rights away as a private entity. Paxton said in a statement on Friday, continuing, this case is not over. I will continue to fight this on the merits to uphold Texans' ability to defend themselves, which is protected by state law. While Texas clearly prohibits this type of gun ban, I will be working with the legislature this session to protect law-abiding citizens' Second Amendment rights on public property. Interesting. It almost sounds to me like he knew that what he was writing, that his argument was not going to stand, but he did it in such a way that he would be able to go back to his constituents and say, hey, I argued this for you, even though he seemed to leave out kind of a key part of the argument. Of course, this policy from the State Fair of Texas stems from an October 2023 shooting during the State Fair of Texas last year, in which a moron named Cameron Turner apparently smuggled, I think he smuggled it in. I've seen a couple conflicting reports, but I don't believe he was lawfully carrying the firearm at the fair. If somebody from the State Fair wants, or somebody else who knows more on that, reach out and let me know in the comments if I'm off on that. But I believe he smuggled this gun into the fair and then, like a moron, got into a jawing match with a few other morons in which Mr. Turner, said that he feared for his life, and in self-defense, shots were fired. Unfortunately, surveillance video seemed to show otherwise, in which this so-called group of guys that were jawing back and forth with Turner, they didn't have weapons. They did, other than running their mouths. It doesn't seem like the surveillance video, at least according to reports from CBS News and others, it doesn't seem like they were actually a genuine threat. And luckily, the grand jury did not buy the argument either, and they indicted Turner on 3 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Like I said, I think that AG Paxton's argument lacking the merit there may have been on purpose. It may have been intentional, and in such a way that he would be able to go back from the Texas Supreme Court and go back to his constituents, and particularly the Second Amendment supporters, who we know in Texas are plentiful, and be able to say, hey, I argued it, but the courts rejected it, and now we need to go to the legislature to kind of clear this up. That's my gut feeling. It is just speculation, of course, but it's an interesting case, and as it unfolds, it's the type of case that would have impact across the entire state of Texas, and quite frankly, I think something that other state attorneys general might end up arguing in the future for their carry laws, whether they be open carry states or concealed carry. Now, if y'all don't know me, I am super pro Second Amendment. I absolutely encourage people to learn how to use a firearm, carry it if they feel confident enough to do so. Make sure you're doing so legally and safely and responsibly. However, I'm also sensitive to the fact that there, I think in a lot of cases, is a public interest in prohibiting firearms from being in locations that people tend to be emotionally compromised or can easily get emotionally compromised. This is why you have gun bans, even in places where carrying is completely legal. This is why you have gun bans in bars. This is why you are absolutely, even in places like in Texas, as an example, or even in Florida, which I frequent often, you can carry, if you're legally carrying concealed, like in the state of Florida, you can carry into a restaurant if they have a bar. So, think someplace like Chili's or Applebee's or something, a place like that. You can carry your firearm. You may not go into the bar area. And regardless of where you are in the restaurant, you 100% may not consume alcohol while you're drinking or while you're carrying. It's just a no-no and the reason there is alcohol messes with you, tends to get you emotionally compromised. And the last thing you want is some drunk dude in Chili's pulling out his gun to be like, hey, check this out. And, now all hell breaks loose. So I understand that there needs to be some level of restriction where people do get emotionally compromised. And like I said, to me, that typically means places like sporting events, bars, casinos, any place really wherever alcohol could be in play. But where does a state or county fair fit into that? So here's the big question. Anyone who's been to the State Fair of Texas knows that, like so many of our fairgrounds across the country, it's not exactly in the best area of Dallas. Just like the New Mexico State Fair here in Albuquerque, is down in what we call the Southeast or the war zone. And having spoken with Dan Morning, the New Mexico State Fair manager, at length over the years, he's a good friend of mine. And, his attitude is, he can't control what goes on outside the gates, but he can control the environment inside the gates and make sure that it is safe as possible for the families who are attending the fair and the guests coming into the fair. But what do you do if you're a responsible father who wants to make sure he's capable of protecting his wife and children, not while you're eating a corn dog and watching the pig races, but when you're in the transitional space between the fair and your vehicle in particular? If anyone who's really understands concealed carry and understands self-defense, transitional spaces are where you really got to pay attention. You're walking from inside a building out to your car. You go into the gas station to pay for gas, or you go in and buy yourself a Coke and a candy bar and you're walking back out. That transitional space from being back in the building to back inside your vehicle safely is where a lot of attacks can happen. So what do you do when you're that father walking out of the State Fair of Texas and you're in that transitional space and now you're vulnerable? Because the State Fair of Texas, Cotton Bowl and whatnot, they're not in that great an area of town. That's a big question. You might think that according to the State Fair's policy, well, you're on your own. And it may seem cold and callous. At the same time, as someone who works in this industry, I'm also super empathetic to the position that the board of directors for the State Fair of Texas is in. They have a duty to provide a level of protection for their guests. But where does that obligation end? And what does that obligation actually look like? Now, their insurance company, we don't hear a lot about this when you hear about places like the State Fair of Texas saying, nope, no more firearms, even legally. If you have a carry permit, you can't bring them on property. When, there was a whole dust up a few years back. Maybe it was just before COVID or after COVID. I know the transition was kind of going on where Disney theme parks said, nope, we're putting metal detectors up. Universal had bag checks forever, as had Disney, but then Universal added, everybody's got some level of metal detectors or wands or whatnot now. And the thing that we all have to realize, because this doesn't get brought up a lot, we call it security theater, and to a great extent it is. because if somebody wants to fire shots at the State Fair of Texas, there is no policy, no metal detector, no wand that is going to stop that from happening. But what we don't hear about, and what I'm guessing is likely involved here with this policy, is the insurers for the State Fair of Texas, their liability insurance company. And I don't know who it is, but I'm guessing most of these companies have started to do the same thing. They're going to require more and more metal detectors and wands and surveillance cameras and additional police resources and security resources in order to mitigate damages from situations like a shooting on a fairgrounds or at a Disney theme park. Because the whole purpose behind that is you got to think about the aftermath. This is one of the things that I remember very closely when I did my concealed carry training at my original class years ago. We were very lucky in that the instructor, not only was he retired police officer, but he was also an attorney. So he understood both sides. He understood the tactical side of of how to protect yourself in an actual shooting, and he understood the legal side of how to protect yourself from the law afterwards. And so he gave us a lot of insight. One of those insights was that you want to mitigate damages. Insurance companies are going to want to mitigate their damages, meaning specifically that if, let's just say you have a mass shooting or any type of shooting, like this idiot last year at the State Fair of Texas, and he hits 3 people. Now I don't know if the 3 people that he hit, I was having, in a couple of the articles I looked at, I was having trouble distinguishing, because they don't really write very well in the media anymore. I was having trouble distinguishing whether it was the supposed aggressors that got hit or whether there were innocent bystanders. And so what you have happen is a situation where, put yourself in the shoes of the insurance company. You've had a shooting, and let's say you've had innocent people hit at the State Fair of Texas or Disney World or the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta or any of these big events that we have all across the country. It's one of the things that it's that great piece of Americana, the state and county fair. Imagine you have a shooting like that, and now you're in court. Now you're negotiating settlement. Do you want to be the insurance company that has to say, well, we knew it was a possibility. There's always some crazy out there willing to do something crazy, but we didn't do anything to protect the fairgrounds? Or do you want to be the insurance company that comes in and says, ladies and gentlemen, the jury, our client, the State Fair of Texas, did A and B and C and D and E and F. They had cameras, they had metal detectors, they had fencing up around the perimeter, they had security throughout, they had canine units inside, they had all these different layers and layers and layers of protection. Do you want to be that in that position, or do you want to be in the position of, well, yeah, we knew it was a possibility, but we didn't do anything? Because one is going to result in maybe a $2 million settlement, the other might result in a $50 million settlement. So that's, I think, what pushes a lot of this. And speaking to some people who have insured events in the past, that does push to a great extent some of this. So what's the answer to these problems? Does the State Fair of Texas have it right in blocking lawful carry of firearms on their property? Folks, I don't have the answer to that question. What I do know is this is a scenario that every single fair in our country has to look at and think about and have an answer to prior to their gates opening. Not just in Texas. There are lots of states where firearms can be legally carried. There are states like here in New Mexico. New Mexico State Fair is state property. However, because it's state property, even though I legally carry a firearm, I cannot do so at the State Fair of New Mexico. It's not allowed because it's state property. So, but the states, the folks down at the fairgrounds still have to figure out what are their mitigation techniques. What are they doing? Are they using surveillance cameras? Are they using canine units? Are they using metal detectors, wands, you name it? They've still got to be able to mitigate that. So we'll see how the story develops. For now, it's going to be interesting to watch. And currently, We'll see how it goes the rest of the fair, but the State Fair of Texas is running right now. They opened September 27th a few days ago, and they run through October 20th. If you're in the area, by the way, the State Fair of Texas is absolutely one of the marquee fairs in this country. I mean, it's Texas. What do you expect? You can get all the information on the State Fair of Texas if you would like to go be a guest and enjoy some fun this month at the State Fair of Texas. Check them out at bigtex.com.